Hello, this is David Morales, CEO and founding developer of VZ, also known as Visual Zen. Our topic today is an interesting one, and our guest is even more interesting, but we'll go to our purpose real quick building better pathways for student and supporter success. Kind of what we're doing this season is really digging into the insights of our current clients and also colleagues in the industry. And today, our particular topic is very important. It's called changing the narrative. Relius, how are you doing today?
I am doing really good and excited to be here with you.
Oh man, we got a lot of good things to go through, some serious and some fun. But what's most important for all of us is understand why we're talking about changing the narrative. It's a big topic. So, just in a couple sentences, if you could briefly explain why we're talking about this today.
I think when we just think of higher ed in general, sometimes we're hesitant for change, as well as when we think of who is higher education created for and is certain type of students, able students, as well as the demographics of what we're looking for. So changing the narrative is kind of more so owning that all students are different, but also making sure we create systems where students matter and not just belong. And I think that's for me the biggest thing. Sense of belonging means the ownership is on them to find their place at their university. But for me, I want to create a system where they matter. So when they walk in, they know that this is where they're supposed to be.
Perfect. I mean, you said it better than I could. A lot of the time when I do these podcasts, people don't understand who I'm talking to and why it's important. So I'd like the audience to get to know you. And just to be clear, our audience has kind of changed a bit. As I mentioned previously, they used to be your colleagues, but also we have a younger audience and people outside of the industry trying to understand exactly what the hell we're doing here and why orientation professionals are so important and need to be heard. And I'll tell you a little later about a conversation I had with a CIO recently about that. So back to you, Relis. Talk us and walk us through how you ended up in your role today, educational career, maybe where you grew up, so we have a better idea who you are.
I grew up in East Texas. I was raised by my grandma till I was 9. My mom had twins when she was really young. Before she was 15, had twins. So my grandma was the foundation of who I am and kind of instilled that hunger for education and knowledge. Went on to live with my mom later on in life and had a lot of challenges. Went to college, wanted to be a math teacher and track coach because track saved my life. Um, but teaching was not where my heart was at. In particular, math, because you teach for a test. I wanted to make an impact, and I was super involved in college, and that's where I found out higher education. One of my mentors, Dr. Zach Shirley, was like, "Hey, son, have you ever thought of higher education?" Started in um, Res Life, as well as crisis management, and then went to multicultural affairs, and then orientation position had opened up a few times at my university. I had never thought of it, but some of my colleagues in orientation approached me, as well as some of my leadership, and we talked about this role in this position, as well as what it was looking for and needed. And we was kind of, I tell people I was voluntold that I was going to apply, and went through the position and got it. So I am not an orientation lifer, as some people would say. Wasn't born in orientation per se. I was an orientation leader in undergrad, but this is my first full-time position in orientation. But my background is logistics and higher education.
Well, it's funny. I was going to ask you that. I ask everyone that. Were you orientation leader? And that's always some important intel to have at some point. Now, you talked about how you ended up in that role, but also what's important is your educational degrees that you have, because I think those are very important to another topic I'd like to talk about. So tell us how you got to your PhD.
So for me, I went straight through. Got my PhD at 26, but I went to undergrad at A&M Commerce and got my bachelor's. Then went straight to University of Central Arkansas and got my first master's in college student personnel. And then went to LSU, started my doctorate. My doctorate's in ed leadership and research. My focus is ed research. Tell people I'm a numbers person. Stats is my thing. But also ended up being voluntold by my chair that I was going to go get a master's as well in applied research, measurement, and evaluations, which is stats. And then my research, my certificates is in urban and education. And then I have a graduate minor in Africana studies from LSU as well. So to me, my education experience is all around, but it's who I am as a person. Even undergrad thesis was on blackmail and persistence. My master's thesis was looking at blackmail persistence. My dissertation was looking at sense of belonging and mattering for Black students at historically white institutions. So again, just tying in my passion and my identities to make sure I'm leaving a better tomorrow.
Well, I think it's important setting the stage. I did find one of your spotlights on LSU's website, and it was talking about you being the youngest director at 27 and the first Black director in that position. And one of the phrases that caught, and I like to hit things straight up because I had this conversation with Dr. Dwayne Williams from Montclair, who now is in Texas, right around the corner from you, about a phrase called imposter syndrome. Tell me about that.
Many times when I walk into rooms, I think for me, I don't see myself or similar representation. And so, even currently as director, when I'm making decisions, when I'm talking to my colleagues, it is sometimes I have to remind myself, hey, you were chosen for this position. You are leading orientation, and be confident in who you are. Know who you are, but whose you are. As well as, again, one of my favorite phrases is, I have a debt that can never be repaid. My ancestors died, fought for these liberties that I have now. So I also owe it to them to walk into these rooms, be confident, and be the best me that I can be, which is still very challenging. One, being young, being Black, and to me at times being a doctor, especially at UTA, when a lot of my division, a lot of spaces, they don't hold terminal degrees, as well as question a lot of times my merit.
Mm-hmm. Well, earlier today, I'll leave the person nameless and institution nameless for now because we're doing a future podcast recording with him. But I let him know that I was interviewing you, and he himself has been through your shoes, but in a different lens. But one of the things he was telling me about is that once you've overcome that imposter syndrome, you kind of start struggling with who you were. And some people forget that along the path. Do you find that struggle at all
I
of where you
do.
came? Yeah. Tell me a little bit.
I mean, I think as I come to who I am, um, as well as I think as you move up the politics of higher education, I think the lens that you have to see things with and the bureaucracy, um, coming from assistant director of multicultural affairs to a coordinator to a director, I tell my team all the time the politics is so real. And sometimes I have to be intentional on how I word things, the language that I use, even how I show up in spaces, because what I used to be able to do, I can't anymore.
Okay, well, thank you. And the reason why that's all important, it's the foundation of the conversation today on back of what we talk about the topic, changing the narrative. Now, when we had started talking about this, you said that was very passionate about it. And prior to this conversation, you said that's almost like your theme in your department there. Tell me a little more about that.
So at UTA, I think a lot of times we are scared of change, and we're comfortable being comfortable. And so I've had to come in and certain processing things. Well, it's been like this for 10 years, or hey, man, I've been at this position for 20, 30 years, a lot of my leadership. I don't think we need to change, or maybe this process is working. It just needs to be hashed out a little bit more. So coming in and looking from an effective standpoint of logistics and like, hey, logistically, what are other institutions doing? How are they being more productive? What does effectiveness look like? But also understanding who our students are. So it's not just also the, okay, well, I'm assuming this, or what does the trend say? What are other schools? I just got back from a site visit at College Station yesterday and looking at a lot of things they're doing in their research and understanding of who their students are. I was like, this is what I need. This is the profile. But also for me, again, making sure students just don't belong, they matter. And that's been my mantra, which is changing the narrative to you belong here. I
Well, it
don't want
seems,
you,
go ahead.
I don't want you to come here and try to find your sense of belonging. I want you to come in and we already have the processes ready for you to be successful and not creating the plane as it's flying.
Well, I mean, it seems like a big elephant. That's why I said I was kind of interrupting because I'm just feeling overwhelmed hearing about what you have to, take a little bit of a bite out of first. So when you came on board as director, what were one of the things that you took a bite of in changing the narrative?
I think our first thing was technology. Um, thanks to you in particular, we were doing a lot of things where we were printing out schedules. We were highlighting, this person then highlights and goes to this next person to verify. And so just a lot of our processes was like, how can we be more effective technology to help boost the experience? A lot of the changes when I first started in April, I had to learn orientation, but I also had to learn UTA. So this, my first 3 to 4 months was, my first week was orientation. I literally got hired, and they're like, "Hey, can you start next week?" And then we have a first orientation on Thursday, and some of our stuff hadn't been figured out yet, or certain processes with holes on student accounts, and making orientation a soft hole versus a hard hole. And so it was a lot for me figuring out my job. But now that I figured it out, we've come in and also are owning more of the process to help change the narrative. I think in previous, orientation was there, but we were a supplement, and others had more say in our process. And we're coming in kind of saying, hey, no, orientation is going to define this experience now.
Yeah, and you talk about the bureaucracy and the politics and everything like that. One of the things that I'm facing of understanding is we originally had a three-pronged approach, a three-layered approach to understanding our industry to grow as a company. One is like yourself, orientation professionals in that realm. The other, like VP of enrollments and vice chancellors and such, and the other is the CIO world. We also realized there was even a higher, not even just higher, a different world, which is like the president and vice president, because these CIOs are mainly have directives that come up from above, but CIOs have such strong power on what technology is being used in departments that they also have to, play politics on how to get these campus partners working together. And I think by talking to the CIOs, I've seen a gap of understanding of what the orientation brings, and that's what these podcasts are for. So as you're advocating and helping me share with young audiences, you're also helping me share, and this is why you're the ambassador of both worlds, kind of these higher ups saying that orientation is important. Maybe the mindset, the narrative that we were stuck in, or the things that we were done, we need to break apart and open up, and I need your help. Don't typecast us in the way it had been. Let's break that mold. But we also need to work with technology, and you're limiting us by different factors of what we can do. One of the things that I like to kind of throw on your plate is coming into the role. How many different campus partners did you have to deal with? I mean, did you deal with the registrar? Did you deal with like family programs? Like what were we looking at?
I dealt with everyone. So in my position, it was everyone had a say so, everyone had thoughts. Everyone thought orientation was supposed to be doing a certain thing. So it was really the politics for me, which was super challenging at times. Because I reported directly and indirectly to a lot of positions, which was very unique. And so that was a whole thing for us.
Cool. And so, which department are you closely knit to? Is it like admissions, or like who are you talking most with usually?
Um, so I'm in student affairs, but I work hand in hand with enrollment management, advising, and our registrar's office. And so those three I meet regularly with, but in particular, advising and registration is my biggest campus partner, as we try to also get to a 90% or higher advising registration rate at orientation.
Okay, so as you're going to different campus, and I'm setting the stage for more questions here. As you said, you went to another campus to learn about what they're doing there. Other people want to learn about what you're doing there at UTA. Can you talk about your program a little bit so they could have a better understanding?
So we're restructuring our program, but typically what our program was looking like was you came to orientation. We had our sessions, financial aid, student accounts, some of our fun experiences, small groups, and then advising and registration. And that was at the end of the day. We are redoing more of that experiences, and like we're creating a parent and guest experience where if you're a parent and guest, you just came. There's 2 sessions for you, but now we're trying to add a social aspect. So a parent and guest dinner. We're trying to rethink our parent and guest networking opportunities, connection to campus, even with our parent and family association. Our transfer students, recognizing that yes, they want to come to UTA, and that maybe they just want to register and be advised. But how do we acclimate them to campus pride, campus traditions, and introduce them to spirit of being a Maverick, as well as our freshmen, understanding that we have different levels of freshmen where, hey, they might want a 2-day orientation, some might want a 1-day. But also, how do we address the holes? How do we create systems where you can come to orientation and have all your holes addressed? Also, understand that we all are Mavericks. I think one of our biggest things we talk about is, for me, there's a lot of isolation. We had our transfer Mavericks, or we call them transfer students. Then we had our freshman Mavericks. Then we had our international students. I'm like, no, we are all Mavericks. So starting with that marketing, that messaging, and building that experience where we're a large school. We have over 45,000 students. But I tell people when I walk around campus and I see other universities on, I see our sports teams and other events not fully packed. Like, it to me starts with orientation and getting that acclimation to spirit, traditions, as well as that proud to say we are Mavericks. And so that's some of the things we're trying to instill in our program, while also addressing again our students' needs and understanding also how we can better serve them.
Well, I mean, it's one thing to say that you use the VZO product. I mean, the VZO product was there before you got there. And what we try to educate people that we just have a platform. It's how our clients use it to help what they're doing. But if they're not informed of the things that we can do, then they're challenged a little bit of saying, I didn't know we could do that. One of the great stories I have for the audience is when Relius invited me and he took me to a barbecue joint and we could actually sit down and talk a little bit. I learned a little more about him and his initiatives and directions. And it was almost meeting a brand new face and a brand new person and a brand new thing. And I started to realize, like, man, this guy's going places. I got to figure out what is his vision 2-3 years down the road. And that's hard to get in your head because when you're changing the narrative, that means part of your vision is breaking something to add new things and mold it and shape it into where you want to go, and having the right technology there to help. You had mentioned something, it's a topic that we're covering this season. So now this part of the video podcast, we're breaking it up into these different hot topic areas. I want to spend some time on advising. And I want to get in your head that how does pre-advising and advising currently work for you guys, and where do you see that going maybe in the next 2-3 years?
So right now, our infrastructure isn't created for the number of students that we have. I will honestly say that as director. Again, we had this past summer almost 15,000 students come through orientation, and we're doing one-on-one advising. I am trying to work with our advising teams to get us to group advising, but also recognizing we have to address holes and some other things. So at orientation, the advisors can do what they need to do to be successful. But also within our advising, our pre-advising, you can set up meetings, but I can't guarantee you have the meetings, which means because you might have a meningitis hold, you have your TSI hold. We have a lot of holds at UTA. And so you might meet with your advisor, but you have all these holes and it might take you a month to get these holes addressed. And then your classes have filled up. This has changed. So our team has created a call team that we're going to do to, once orientation opens up in February, start calling every student, start emailing. We're working with you on the emails. We're working on you on the text messages. So utilizing VZ truly in a capacity where I was like, what? They could do this? Why are we doing check-in this way? Why are we doing name? So again, utilizing all the access that you give us to make sure our students are supported. And I also think with our advising, just seeing what other institutions are doing. Again, I think we grew really quickly and our model did not change. And so also looking at what other institutions are doing is something that my team is currently really trying to understand so we can create a better plan of action.
Well, I'm going to talk about something you just said right there about learning what other people are doing. I know I said it earlier. As I've been calling clients and they've known that our podcasts have been disseminated and going out, I've heard a lot from people saying, I wonder what other schools are doing. Who's on your next podcast? Who's doing it? I want to talk about the program. And now you're saying you want to learn about other people. I'll get back to advising in a second, but since you brought it up, I'm going to pick on you guys. I'm going to come next summer and we're going to do a live podcast in Texas and one of your schools we like to do there and start to learn a little bit about how the experience is from a different lens, not really just from a marketing lens, but from how people can learn from that. And I think that's a great tool that I'm so proud that you make the effort to go see other schools and see what they're doing. A lot of our clients may not have the resources to do that. So us going around and showing what you do and maybe what Baylor does or TTU or anything like that, I think that'll be beneficial. So thank you for being an ambassador for, at least I see these initiatives for people who can't, and they need that. And thank you for doing that. Back to the advising thing, why we think it's so important is a large portion of our clients are funded by other initiatives at the school, whether they come from IT, like CIO, president, or even from registrar and such. But determining class size is imperative, that enrollment class, getting people enrolled. And, there's all these terms that keep coming up, yield and melt and everything like that, that I heard this today, but it's not unique. I've heard it again and again through the last 18 months when I made the big shift of understanding our clients better, is that all these other people said there's these handoffs between departments. And when the melt gets to 10%, it's really bad. Let's blame orientation. Let's say it's their fault. When I feel that sometimes orientation is fettered, they are restricted from, we're doing our best here. How can we work on that handoff or transition a little better? So kind of in your, not just changing the narrative, but also your vision. I want to talk about the admissions side. So I want to learn here, and I want our audience to learn. How quick are you receiving these admitted students? At what point are you beginning to do pre-engagement?
So once a student is admitted, they automatically get an email in our system from VZ as they're imported. So typically about the next day, they let them know, hey, you can sign up for orientation and do all of this, as well as I get emails as well as numbers and reports from our enrollment management team. And we have a Monday meeting, two standing meetings actually on Mondays, where I know the numbers, I know how many were admitted the previous week, to help me understand session sizes as well as trends and as well as just a lot of information that originally I don't think I understood the context of, but now I'm like, okay, this is helping me do my job better. So we have a good partnership, and I think our partnership with enrollment management at UTA is getting better. As also, I am more of a hey, let's share all the information. So I don't try to keep anything from orientation a secret, and I understand why some would, but if we're not successful, you see our advising rates, you see our registration rates, you're going to see everything, because it also helps me be more accountable, but also holds my peers to the same. So when I'm like, hey, can you get this? Or I'm like, I'm doing the same thing that I'm asking you to do, as well as just getting to know people. I believe a lot of people don't get to know their counterparts. And so we just see emails or phone calls when we need things, but I'm able to say, hey, Scott, how's your granddaughter doing? Or how's this going? Or hey, Troy, how's your daughter doing at X, Y, and Z institution? And so we've also built those relationships. So now it's not just, oh, Relius Director of Orientation or Scott, the Executive Director of Enrollment Management. I'm a face, and you also know who I am.
Well, I think that's important because there's two sides of here. Is one is leveraging technology to get what you need to get done, and two is building those relationships that are strategic on doing that. And that's one thing that we've been trying to teach our clients is that the technology actually, because the orientation management aspect of EZO is one thing, but once you start touching pre or early engagement, pre-orientation, you have to build those relationships with the campus partners that you're talking about. So if we go back to that early engagement aspect of just the student that, you get the imported students, you send the email, text messages, there's a task list that's in the system that you're learning as a tool. Most of our clients didn't know that they could do pre-orientation or early engagement using our tool. And you talked about TSI and you talked about the things you're doing. But one thing you said interesting was the call campaign of how you are going to reach out in February, right? Is that what you said? Mm-hmm. And so that call campaign, tell me more about that. Like how many staff members are you looking at doing that, or what type of scripting do you use?
So this is fairly new. My assistant director and one of my coordinators, we kind of just fleshed this out about 2 weeks ago. The final details. We've hired 9 student leaders to pilot it right now. But what we're going to do is every student, we're going to call them and one confirm that they're coming to UTA, that they signed up for an orientation session, as well as address any holes. So, hey, we see that you haven't completed your transcript, or you haven't selected this, or you haven't uploaded your meningitis. And so we're going to call them so they know. But then also, if they have questions, be able to ask those questions right then and there. And then we're going to send them an email about their specific holes. So, as well as a text message. So they're getting this in multiple ways. So they, hopefully when they come to orientation, everything will be addressed. We're also starting super early because we're also trying to get all of our students that if you were admitted before April to try to attend orientation in May or June. What we're seeing is a lot of our students are coming to the later orientations, but hey, let's go ahead and address these holes. Let's also get you in an earlier orientation so you can do everything that you need.
I think that's really smart because, that helps you, that the advanced assets now we're naming path, that engagement path is early set for you and encouraging our clients to jump early. You're a prime example of why that's important. And again, this is the second time I'm saying, and I'm proud of you for making, it's not a risk, it's a strategy, and you're trying the strategy. And Dr. Ryan Newton out of UCF always talks about that is you have to try something a little different just to innovate and get better. And you're doing it. And I would love to see the results of that down the road. So in discussion of that, you're talking about getting 9 student leaders and OLs. How are you doing your recruiting at your school for SLs and OLs? And just so everyone knows, student leaders, orientation leaders, eventually they're all just, either incoming or mentors from other years. But talk to us a little bit about that.
So for us right now, again, my whole office is new. I am the oldest in my office, and I started in April. So we revamped a lot of processes. Also, just being transparent, we didn't know a lot of the processes. And so how we do orientation is we start recruiting in September. So we did a huge thing, and we partnered with athletics, and we had like an orientation recognition day. But we emailed out everyone who attended orientation this past year, as well as past OLs. Hey, if you're interested, want to learn more about orientation, come out. This is our game, basketball game. Again, helping also build spirit and tradition, but also talking about orientation. Then we do intra-sessions. So we do intra-sessions in early September and October. And then our application goes live in middle October, right before homecoming starts. And so then from there, we have group interviews as well as individual interviews. But during the application process, there's also questions that they have to ask and answer. So videos where they submit, like, show us some of your spirits, show us your personality. Why are you interested in orientation? Tell us about your experience at orientation. And then that we narrow that down to individual interviews and a group process to also recognize how do they work in groups, who are they, how are they showing up, as well as just getting different dynamics. I am a huge introvert. Most people don't know that. And I tell people, I need to retreat after orientation and just be in my office in the dark by myself. But most of my office is extroverts. So we're also looking for a balance of personalities and some other aspects as well. And then we do offer letters. We just actually sent out offer letters 2 weeks ago, as well as we let them know all the orientation dates, expectations, trainings, and then next steps. Because we do trainings every Monday, starting the second week of school from 3 to 6. We have orientation training up until April because orientation season starts in April for us.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because one of the things that I think I've told you about personally is that VZ, we're looking at expanding the recruitment and lifecycle of orientation leader through our platform. And we piloted that with a couple schools, and that's been successful. But seeing how you're mapping that now in the new program, how you're doing OL apps, getting them in the training, it's interesting to see that layered as an important integral process of eventually the technology that you're using with VZ. And slow and steady is, with constant innovation is what we're here to help you with. And thank you for opening with that. But one of the things that kind of caught my ear was that when you did recruiting, you said you did it through athletics. Did you also include Greek life?
So we partner with Greek Life, and we send out all of our interviews and applications through FSL, Fraternity and Sorority Life. But we also tried to get them to come to our signature events, which was in
Got it.
particular, we did events with athletics. And then we had info sessions at each athletics event. And then we had interest meetings as well. But FSL, student activities, multicultural affairs are some of our biggest campus partners that we get our leaders from.
Okay, so I know we're hitting a lot of topics, man. We could probably talk for 8 hours and eat a lot of darn food. I'm going to say damn food because when I was there, it was the damn best thing I ever ate. But the next time when I see you, I believe it's going to be in January. I want to try something different. I think Molly's coming with me this time, so that'll be fun. So as we discuss these topics of pre-engagement, one area that we didn't cover yet is supporters. And I'm drilling on this constantly, and everyone I speak to is how are they addressing family members? How are they addressing coaches? Anything that falls under the umbrella of a supporter. Coming into the new program, and I heard you say it, and I know a little bit, but not too much. You don't run family programs as an orientation director, do you?
So we have a separate office that does that, TPS, Transition and Parent Services. At orientation, we own the process and work hand in hand with them. But Parent and Family Association, Parent Family Weekend, all of that is through a different office.
Okay, so with that being said, part of your job is those guests that come to your orientation session, which happen to be parents. Not all of them are guests, but they're still supporters, and you can get that information beforehand, which we told you about. One of the features in our product is the supporter, not just the platform, but the module that we have. Mm-hmm. Part of your new program and changing their culture there and doing these things, how are you addressing supporter engagement?
So I'll be honest, that is something I think we aren't the best at. Our parent and guest experience, they had 2 sessions that they went to that were just for them. And then a lot of the sessions they went with their students too. But at many institutions, you see a separation because, again, you want the students to have their own experience, guests have their own. So we are working on that. One of the things that we're talking about doing is a parent and guest dinner. We're talking about different sessions where parent and guest Q&A. We're asking what also are we doing, because we recognize that a lot of our students also are family members. And so one of the ideas that 2 of my staff members have thrown out is, are we able to kind of have like a daycare at orientation? Mm-hmm. So as we recognize many of our students are coming and they're non-traditional in the aspects that they're caretakers, what are we doing to ensure that we're supporting them in their success? As well as when we have children at orientation, what are the experiences that they have? One school was like, oh, we give out coloring books that have university themed stuff so they can actually color and do. I was like, that's something that's unique, but I don't think we've truly focused on our guest experience, and we're a work in progress. I can't say we figured it out. I don't even have the guest experience schedule yet. I have all the other schedules because I am still trying to learn, and I know I'm not the best. So I'm looking at the research, I'm reading books, I'm visiting campuses. And one of my favorite phrases is copy genius, but tweak it. So I'm looking at what other schools do. And then I'm like, okay, that works. I like that. Now, how can we make this fit at UTA?
Well, I think you're doing a great job because not everything fits. What you're doing is applying to see if it does work and then tweak it, like you said, to come up with some new insights, which we'll talk about later when we go over the crystal ball area. But I don't think you give yourself enough credit, man. I've seen your program. Since you came on board, and that's why I came to visit you. You have a lot on your plate, and I don't think people quite understand that yet. And so I'd like to, we don't need to talk about it, but I'm going to speak on your behalf because I've seen it. You're doing a damn good job, man. And we can talk about your accolades down the road because you're kind of like me, is that we don't want to talk about it. It's good that I did it, but now I got to worry about the problems. But I just rest anyone's listening, you got to pay attention to what he's doing there because by 23, 24, and 25, that's 2023, a lot of stuff's going to be incredibly different and I think great. So with that supporter engagement, and now we talked about your school happens to be different than our school. So when we started our company 21 years ago, we only had a few schools and they all had the same type of orientation program. So we thought the whole United States was the same way. Not the case, obviously. A lot of our clients had family programs within orientation, and you just told me that it's separate. You actually called it transition family, programs and such. We have schools that are that way too, but this year the reverse happened. It came from above and said, you know what, family weekend. You do such a good job, Relius, with orientation. You've done all this change. We're giving you family weekend now. Now it's on your plate. What do you do about it? And that's why I asked you about the support engagement and how you're changing the parent and guest experience, seeing your school and seeing the things going and creating that sense of belonging. And also we'll talk more beyond sense of belonging because you had brought that up in the beginning, of what really matters. That paying attention to those parents and guests, as you were even saying, daycare for some of them in that sense, or even for the parent and guests, having different types of resources available for them is key. But I'm going to call you Ray. So Ray, what would you do today if someone said, man, you got to do family weekend 2023? How are you going to do it, Ray?
First thing I'm going to do is probably text you and ask, do you know anybody who is responsible for parent and family weekend? And then my second thing is Google. I am going to Google parent and family weekend schedules and look at what other schools are already doing and compare that to what we already have. At the end of the day, I tell people the mission is I got to do my job and I have no choice but to do parent and family weekend. So my team, we're going to come together. I believe in brainstorming meetings, as well as my team will tell you I have a huge whiteboard in my office. It's almost 7 feet. And we're going to write this out, schedule this out, create timelines, goals, logistic plans, plan of actions. But I think my first thing I'm going to do is what does the research say for parent and family experiences? Then look at what other schools are doing. So then I can also compare that to what we're doing and then just hash it out. As well as, believe it or not, I do a lot of meetings with campus partners. So in particular, Dr. Jessica Sanchez and Shabazz Brown, they're two directors who came in at the same time I came in that I actually respect and trust. And I will say, hey, y'all, does this make sense to you? What are you thinking? What am I missing? Shabazz is over my Office of Cultural Engagement, Social Change. So also that context of that, as well as I bring in Adam, who's over international, global education, and Jessica, and it's like, help me figure this out. And those are actually been some of my best meetings because my team, again, we get stuck in the weeds, but when I bring it outside, they're like, well, did you think of this or why this? Well, can you justify this? And that has been, to me, some of the best collaborations that I've seen. And so I would also do that with Parent and Family Weekend. And then I'm going to just start calling people, calling and emailing other directors.
Well, I'm going to challenge you, man. We just finished a podcast. It's about to be released where the first two universities of all of our client base, Binghamton and NCAT, North Carolina, challenged us to use the VZO platform to build Family Weekend out. And it was the early adopting phase of that. And it was so successful that the vice chancellors gave them like accolades and all these crazy things that went on. The problem is they did such a good job, they got to do it again next year. And now it's being adopted into the orientation world. And that's a little scary because we're doing research right now. Not bad scary. I think people, like you said earlier, I'm looking at my notes of you, is scared of change. So changing the narrative, even just the orientation professional should be thinking about, the scope is changing and saying, wait a minute, that transition also could be a cohesive relationship with whatever program out there. Like you said, I got to go meet with these people and say, how would you address that? Because could you imagine if I told you, Relius, that if you got in charge of Family Weekend and you found out that 75% of the people who went to Family Weekend were the supporters of those students of the incoming class that went through the VZO product? Those two schools are above, one is above 90%, one's above 60% of incoming parents that had touched the VZO system. So that now changes your game. And it changes the scope. And more schools I've talked to, the higher ups are hearing that, saying, wait a minute, what involvement, instead of having this significant drop off of orientation professional responsibility, because they're examining MELT. That's why I told you in the beginning, they're blaming you guys because they're like, your hands behind your back. You're saying, look, we got to pass it off to someone. But I can tell you, we have these people 100% engaged. As you said, they're coming. You only have 2 events now. You're probably going to have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 events. Your parent engagement is going to be so much stronger next year and in 24. Why not continue that engagement strongly because the support is going to help the student. And I would guarantee, not guarantee, that's a hard thing to do. But probability will be that your melt will decrease because you're allowing the supporters to be educated, to get resources, to do something. And you're talking about recruiting for OLs, about getting them to a sporting event and doing that. How about recruiting the parents to be better supporters by coming to those events too? Let them more aware. So anyway, I am throwing it out there because obviously, we've only done it for a couple schools, and we've done it in the past for Christopher Newport University and a little bit for UNC Charlotte a long time ago. But we're pushing hard with that. And, I know I'm throwing this new at you. What are your thoughts? Now, if I said to you again, Ray, I'm giving family weekend, what do you think you'd be doing? Would you want to tackle that challenge?
I do. Also recognizing at UTA of our incoming class, 50% were first gen, 56% of our transfers were first gen. And when we look at family dynamics, in particular, recognizing that, especially now in this generation, that supporters are part of the biggest experience or deciding factors of student success, in particular, where schools they go to, majors, and a lot. So I actually agree with you.
Well, you're a data guy. I knew you have been. No, I got called out. I read the book, The Great Upheaval. So I said 64% of the students are non-traditional. And someone said to me, David, not every school is 64%. I just got a number. But regardless, I like what you're saying. First gen is a large percentage too. And that's why I needed to hear what you had to say right there. This wasn't a setup for you to say, hey, David, like, how do I do family weekend? This is for you. I want to hear what you just said, because I'm going to go to other people right after this podcast and ask them the same darn thing that I asked you and say, seriously, like, think about that first gen. And that meeting I got out of earlier before this podcast, we talked about first gen too. He's first gen. And the challenges there of identity, of who you are, whether you're a Latina X or, you're Black, or you have different subsets of culture in different areas, you got to make it work. And like, I'm going to paraphrase you. These people are supporting those for student success. If you're not addressing those parents, then that's a bit of a challenge. I've known I've thrown a little bit out there for you, and I kind of want to steer to maybe like your personal life a little bit, if you don't mind. And I always come back to reading of some sort, and what books you're interested in. What have you been reading recently? Have you finished a book recently? Started a new book, audio book, anything?
So I am not an audiobook person. I wish I was, but also in my world, I like to escape. And that's the only way I can do this, physical copies. And I'm currently reading 3 books. I'm reading one with my team, Start With Your Why.
Okay, intentionality.
And then I'm reading 2 books personally. The Color Compromise. I'm looking at the role of Christianity in regards to racism. And then the 3rd book that I am rereading this book, and it is How to Be Anti-Racist. And I'm rereading that for a class that I'm going to go guest lecture. And that's my section of the class.
Oh, okay, you just opened up a door. Guest lecture. Does that mean you're going to be highlighting as a professor?
Yeah, so I teach as an adjunct in our doc program, but another professor has asked me to come in and talk about anti-racism. In particular, critical race theory is my theoretical frameworks and my research background. But so applying that book to my research.
I just have to ask, do you see a book in your future? Do you think you'll write one?
One day there's actually a goal of mine.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, I know we've talked a lot about a couple different topics here, really spanning across the board. And I really wanted to thank you for your insight. We're going to have a lot more to talk about down the road. And I want to give you just an opportunity. If we go back to the topic, now that we've talked about all these things, and if you could give me a little more insight of 2 to 3 years down the road, if I ask you the same question about changing the narrative, I'll probably call you out in 2, 3 years down the road and say, is this the same answer that you told me, when we did the video podcast? How do you see yourself addressing changing the narrative 2, 3 years down the road?
I think 2 to 3 years from now, one of the goals of my office is to possibly take on graduate orientations. We only focus on undergrad, in particular, and international graduate students, but also recognizing that graduate students do exist in our Mavericks and their experiences aren't the same, as well as addressing e-learning, which is like online, 100% online programs. And then I think also in the next 2 to 3 years, we're seeing it now, but our student needs have changed.
How so?
When we just talk about and I don't call it the achievement gap, I think of more so as the opportunity gap. So when we start looking at the opportunity gap, when we start looking at persistence, mental health, education attainment, I think there's a lot more that orientation is going to have to shift and understand the needs of our students to ensure our students persist and matriculate. And I think to me, orientation is going to be pivotal in that. So trying to get ahead of that, as well as there's a book called The Demographics of Higher Education. Again, I'm a stats person, love numbers, but it's also telling us the face of higher education is flipping, especially in Texas. So what are our students' identities that they're coming with? How are we also ensuring that success? What is the message and the marketing that we're giving? So I think every 3 to 4 years, we're going to have to reevaluate the narrative, but also ask what is the message that we're giving at UTA, and not I'm going to use a sports analogy. Welcome to the team. Now leave your identities at the door. We need to understand those identities so you can be welcome to the team. Also understanding, changing the narrative in how we see students, the access that we give students, or the lack of. What is the role of professionals at UTA in particular? Because I can only talk for my institution. But I think that narrative conversation 2 to 3 years from now, when you ask me, my response will be the same, and ensuring that students matter and not just belong. But the new focus that we're going to be looking at is going to be totally different.
Okay, so you said the word flipping, and this caught me, and it was a side topic we did in another interview. So I'm going to have fun here. I told you I'm just going to ask you a question. You don't have to know the answer. You can make it up because there is no answer. It's just an imaginary, like you were saying, you go speak to another campus partner about family weekend. That didn't happen. So you said this is what I would do. What happens if I took orientation and your role and everything and flipped it upside down and said, you're doing offboarding now for your university UTA? That means you just did onboarding for all your orientation students. 4 years later, now you're doing offboarding from that first year of 2022 or 21 students coming in. So in 2024, you're now in charge of offboarding. So you would have seen those students between 4 and 5 year students come through. How do you see that? How would you do offboarding?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think one would be understanding how, again, now student success, and student success are different. How are students defining success? In particular, career placement, job readiness, the experiences that they had at UTA. Really looking and diving more into experimental education, and then ensuring now not only are they graduating, but they're graduating and going into fields and aspects that they want to. And
Yeah.
I think we already do that somewhat, but I don't know if an office or department or as an institution, we truly focus on that offboarding process or that matriculation process. We just expect, I think, in particular, students just to figure it out.
It's funny because the more I ask the question, the more it's shaping my mind on something that, right, it's like 4 years down the road, you had VZO as an offboarding system, right? And you had VZO in the beginning, and we get rid of the idea of archives. It's just living student data. And you had the front end and the tail end. And then you can go back 4 years or 5 years and track a student who went through your program and you got them to the offboarding stage from being a stat guy. That's pretty cool stuff to have, to say whatever we were doing back then, because it takes time for student success. And you said that variable change that happens in between, so many variables can happen. But their first impression is a large percentage of drop off. That if they don't have what matters to them, the sense of belonging, identity, or whatever's happening for that first year, we all know what happens. They don't get the right classes. they drop out. They end up going to another university.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always joked with the idea, and this is an idea that when we were exploring orientation leaders, that you take an orientation leader is actually a second year student or more, right? They're never just a freshman student per se, like coming in as a freshman. So you have the life cycle starts as an orientation student, becomes an OL, becomes a mentor, part of the customer service model. And then when they graduate, they go in some leadership role. Maybe they're a president of fraternity along the way or a sorority, do all these different things. You're tracking the life cycle of the OL. Now you're tracking the life cycle of all these students. Man, I think that'd be powerful. And this is my type of thing. So I just want to get your take on that. Is how cool would that be to say, I started the onboarding process. Now I can see it at the offboarding, and holy crap, maybe that 1% change that we did every day did work or didn't work, or we can tweak it at different points.
I think that would be beautiful. And I just know now you're going to have me up at 2 a.m. processing and thinking, because I'm going to be thinking now, like, crap, is that something that we can do? As well as how do we do that? And
Well, yeah, that's a tough thing, and I want to hear what you have to say. And I think that's going to be part of season 3. Is I've asked a lot of people those questions. They're doing what you're doing. They haven't thought about it, but to me, life is onboarding and offboarding on a lot of different things. It depends what journey you're like, because those non-traditional students could be a 45-year-old like me who wants to go back to school, but I'm a freshman, perhaps, if I didn't go to college. So the age gap makes no difference anymore. It's a journey. And that journey, the offboarding for a job, the onboarding for a job, all these things are going on. It just makes sense to me that you would open and close with great success at a university if you track that data outside of just, you have something like Data Lake, which compiles data and says, this is what we think. Or you have a CRM that says, we made a call here and we did that. How about get people understand data in the school who created the program and had direct results of an offboarding process? Even, and this is hypothetical, so let's say next year, 2023, right? At the end of the orientation season, you even went back to 2022 and 21 in the VZO product and said, wait a minute, I want to see where 21 students and 22 students are right now and how many of them are still enrolled. I think that'd be a phenomenal. And maybe you guys do that behind the scenes and I don't know. I've never been asked to do that.
we do that part. We track that. One, because persistence and graduation, so we track all of that. But I think what you're talking at is hinting at more than, again, I think what we're doing is just belonging, and then also graduation. You have gotten down to the mattering aspect of, okay, so after orientation, what does this follow-up look like? What actually have you learned? So it's that, again, orientation leader saying, hey, you're struggling in this class, or we're running reports and seeing certain trends and kind of creating more initiatives to focus on these populations at orientation, but also as you matriculate through your journey at UTA. And to me, that hints more at the student success aspect, but even life after college. So once you graduated, okay, yes, we know your job rates, your job satisfaction, all of this, but you have all my wheels thinking.
Yeah, well, I'm going to throw one more in there, and hopefully the car doesn't do 360. If we talk about that longevity to offboarding, you're also including now these alumni, these students who become back to that first incoming class. If you created that properly, and I said, right, you have 5 years to produce your first student that starts in 2022 and 2027, you need to make sure that they graduate in the offboarding, and you're going to turn them into alumni. Obviously, you couldn't do that by yourself. That's a higher level thinking, which you have. So now you bring in alumni into the orientation process. Say, I have this crazy idea. These kids in 4 years are yours. I hear it all the time. They call like early alumni and they call different names and all these different things. But now it makes even more sense to me. Why aren't the VP of enrollment, CIOs, and everyone paying more attention to orientation, which they should, because they can start getting different campus partners working together early on and keep that process going, but not get rid of orientation. These people were pruning and grooming all these people, but they also want to see the success of the student as much as the rest of the university. So anyway, I was just throwing the alumni piece out there. I think that's a powerful component that hasn't been added to the importance of orientation as much as I think it should, as in they should be brought into the conversation almost immediately and saying, look, we're grooming these people to be your crew. what can you do to come to an orientation session? What resources, financial or sweat equity? Just give us, we don't have enough OLs. I had speak to schools that may have like 20 OLs in their apps, right? And then 10 show up, they're 10 short. Why don't alumni give some people to help and say, look, why don't we grab some members here that they could help? Maybe the customer service model could. Anyway, I'm just throwing ideas at you. Wow. I'll give you a moment to marinate on that because I definitely I think I've thrown so much. And while you're thinking there, I wanted to say this is a great opportunity that you allowed me to interview you. This is only the beginning. As I mentioned, in January we'll be there over the summer. Hopefully recording a session and doing the next big things down the road to see where you're going. I wanted to give you an opportunity, like we give all the people on our video podcast now, and always since the beginning. Your opportunity to say whatever you want. The audience is listening. They need to take away something at the end and do something actionable probably today. Otherwise, they're going to forget this because they're going to be bombarded by something in social media and the news or whatever. But at the end, if they could do something from the word of Dr. Relius Johnson, I'm going to give you that platform. So thank you very much. I'm going to zip it.
So I'm going to say two things. One thing is plugging VZ. And I say that in knowing what you can and have access to. When I became director, a lot of my headaches and a lot of my frustrations was, oh, we do that. Oh, we have this. Well, y'all actually have this in your package. Hey, you could actually text the students, So one, paying that money to learn your software, but also recognizing that a lot of the things that we probably have this frustration, that there's probably a solution. But then I think my biggest thing is campus collaboration, but also institutional collaboration. I believe no matter what we say, we function in silos still. And until we truly break the silos, we can never create student success, as well as create institutional change, which to me is changing the narrative. So as we are better professionals, let's listen to our students. Let's listen to our staff. Let's listen to our administrators, but also let's listen to those who aren't in our field. And sometimes for me, I am a numbers person. So I operate a lot of times in the business setting. And let's break that shell of what we have traditionally done. Now, don't get me wrong, change sometimes is a bad thing. But can we get down to the essence of why? I ask my staff 4 questions all the time. Why are we doing this? Are we doing this to the standard of excellence? Who are we leaving out? And who is this actually benefiting? And that to me has been most of my decisions. And I've also found that I'm okay not being the most liked. Because for me, I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to do a job. And my job is to me the students.